Shalom Bracha. I want to share a very interesting idea from R Kook. I was actually learning this last night with my nephew, and he said that it's worth putting on a short shiur and letting other people enjoy it. This is based on R Kook in his book Orot. It is instead of his books, that all his books are kadosh, but this book, Orot, is Kodesh HaKodeshim, is a special book. And he talks a lot about the ideas of the Geula, of the redemption. It's actually made up of a few sections, this book, and we're busy learning the section called Orot Atchia, the lights that will happen just before the redemption. And trying to understand the complexities of this era that we're living in, with so much good and so much not so good mixed together. And in this section, we're talking about Orot Torah, chapter Mem Dalet, 44. In the older books that I've got are page 84, page Dalet. And R Kook is trying to deal with the reality of that the vast majority of the founders of the modern state of Israel and the modern Zionism that preempted the state of Israel were not religious. Not just that they were not religious, they rejected the values of the religion, sometimes quite strongly, quite vehemently. And though some of them did like to read the Tanakh and they saw values in the Bible, the traditional observance of the Torah was very far from them at best, and sometimes completely against what they taught. And how do we explain this? If this is we believe this is the beginning of the redemption. Obviously, the ultimate redemption is that people will have very strong spiritual values, including the values of Torah, or the values of Torah include everything else. And how could the means of achieving this be brought out by people who are completely against these values? And this, in fact, was the reason that a lot of the religious Jews over the years, the last 150 years or so, rejected Zionism and said that it's just a mistake. Obviously, we can't say Hashem made a mistake. Well, it's a proof that Zionism is not the beginning of the redemption. It's testing us, that we should reject it, etc., etc. And R Kook also says, no, this is definitely it. So in dealing with this, first he points out that we should not be surprised at all, because the sources, the Talmud itself, says that this is what's going to happen in the beginning of the redemption. And in the previous couple of chapters in his book, he points to the Mishnah in the Talmud, the tractate of Sanhedrin, and it's also mentioned in Sotah, where a lot of challenging things will happen just before the Mashiach comes. There we spoke a lot of chutzpah, and now he's talking about the rejection of spiritual values and an emphasis on physical values. So first he gives an explanation that there is a need for us to build up a physically strong nation. Now, 2,000 years in Galut, we were physically very weak. The only thing that kept us together was the Torah. But if you look at pictures of Jews 200, 300, 400 years ago, there were these very miserable people, bent over, long nose, dressed in black, definitely not leaders in their respective states, although over the years there were one or two exceptions that people did see the value, the chokhmah of the Jews, and made them specifically leaders. But we cannot say that the Jewish nation had a strong physical backing. And that was the reality of the redemption. And that had to change. And so first we would ask, why did that have to change? Why do we need to be strong physically if the ultimate value is in spiritual redemption? So in order to understand that, let's look for a moment at a similar question when the Jews came out of Egypt. And there's a request to Hashem, from Hashem to the nation, asking, please borrow money, please borrow goods, vessels, valuable vessels from your Egyptian neighbors. And then these vessels were taken out. You may even be stolen from the Egyptians in order to make Am Yisrael rich. And there's justification. They say we worked so hard for so many years, we were never paid. So that was that money really, we deserved it to belong to us. But why is it so important to take money out of Egypt? And even more so when we came after the splitting of the Red Sea, Chazal, the rabbis say that the money that we got from the spoils of the Red Sea were even greater than the spoils of Egypt, more than the money that they took out, because what happened when the Egyptians ran after the Jews to kill them, after that escape from Egypt, they were so certain of their victory that decorated themselves with all sorts of jewelry and things to show off their victory, and all of those were washed away with them in the sea and then washed to the bank. And the Jews that were on the other side of the bank of the Red Sea enjoyed these valuables. Why? So Rashi asked there, and he gives a beginning of an answer. He said, because many years ago, when Hashem promised to Abraham that they'll come out of Egypt, they'll be in Egypt, they'll come out in the Brit Ben HaBetarim, he said they'll come out B'Rechush Gadol, and he had to fulfill his promise. But still, the question is why? And the answer given is that in order to be a Am that's Kiddush Hashem, an Am that brings the word of Hashem to a physical world, you have to be strong physically. You know, you see somebody who's a miserable, little, weak person, and he's a very holy person, so it may make an impression on you. You may respect him, you may not respect him. But if he's somebody who's a man of the world, he's powerful, he's physically strong, he's wealthy, he's influential, he's intellectually capable, he's all the things that people admire in a secular world. And on top of this, he's got fear of God. Not only does he have, in addition to fear of God, but I emphasize on top of it, he emphasizes that all the other strengths that he has, all the physical strengths that he has, and the wealth and the wisdom, is all subservient to his belief and fear of God. That is Kiddush Hashem. And that's what we had to do. We had to when we came out of Egypt. And in order to do that, we couldn't be a nation of slaves. We had to be turned. We started instantly with getting all this wealth, but it actually took 40 years of progress during the desert to build up that self-confidence. And then when we were strong enough, we were able to conquer Israel and conquer it in the name of Hashem. The same thing is true today. The Jews that were in the shtetl 200 years ago, and the focus was just on learning Gemara, that's not the Jew that could build the powerful state of Israel. It would be a Kiddush Hashem, and it would eventually build the third temple. We had to be a nation of businessmen, of scientists, of high-techers, of leaders of the world. A nation like it is today. It wasn't in R Kook's time. R Kook predicted this. He saw it in the type of prophecy. But this is, you look at Israel today, and it is a force. It is a mighty force. And now the aim at the second stage is when we have this powerful nation, financial, spiritual, physical, military, and on top of this, the next stage is for our leaders to say, and all of this is thanks to Hashem. That is the ultimate redemption of the world. So this process is brought about by, first of all, destroying temporarily and rejecting the spiritual side of the world of Torah, in order to build up the physical part of Hashem. And if all the time when the nation was still weak and they still had their focus on a very limited Torah, they wouldn't have been able to do this. So to speak, the big plan of Hashem was to go through this temporary stage of Zionists that were not just not religious, but anti-religious, in order to get and build up a physically strong Jewish nation in Israel. And then slowly, and R Kook saw it less in his time, we see it a lot in our time, that there's a strong strengthening of the belief deeper belief of Torah that's very deep and complex, and all this raises up the physical strength that there is. So to end this off, we'll just mention a commentary of the Gaon of Vilna on the chapter in Mishle that we sing every Friday night, Hatechiya, about the ideal woman, the ideal wife. And one of the lines there, it says, Sheker achen vehevel hayofi isha yirat Hashem titalan. That beauty is empty. There's nothing, there's no value in beauty. Isha yirat Hashem, but a woman who fears God, she is praiseworthy. The Gaon of Vilna says, if that's really the case, then why does the Torah spend so much time telling us how pretty, how beautiful the Imahot, Sarah, and Rivka, and Rachel were? If it's totally irrelevant, totally vain, why does the Torah spend time on it? Explains the Gaon of Vilna that it depends. If the spirituality, if the physicality is subservient to the spirituality, it's not vain. It's only when it becomes a value on its own right. All we're worried about is our beauty, our wealth, our strength. Then it's vain. But if all of these are means to make us an ideal person, then sheker achen vehevel hayofi, aval isha yirat Hashem, a woman that fears God, even her beauty and her chen titalan will be praiseworthy. B'ezrat Hashem, if we look over the last 74 years of Medinat Israel, and even prior to that, when the process of the Zionism started, you can see that there's a going downwards of spirituality and a very, very strong strengthening. Today, without a doubt, there's more people learning Torah, lots more than there were ever, definitely in Eastern Europe and the whole world over the years, and even in the more than in the times of the Talmud itself. We have, even just in Israel, hundreds and thousands, maybe millions of people finding different frameworks of learning Torah every day. And all of this is on top of a miraculous, strong physical state. Should we take strength in this to keep on strengthening ourselves, especially towards Tisha B'Av? It's very interesting that Tisha B'Av comes just before Elul, and then Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and the ideal festival Sukkot. In other words, it's a step going down in order to build ourselves up, just like the process that we've just described before. Good, Tov. All the best.